I returned home from Egypt. I wanted to be open-minded, but as I replayed the interview in my thoughts, a cold chill came over me. All my life I had believed the Bible stories to be true. I know some people say, you don't need any evidence, just have faith. But if there's no hard evidence for any of it, had I been believing in a lie all this time? And what about my kids and grandkids? What should they put their faith in? Whether you believe these stories or not, isn't it important to know what's really true? This thought came over to me. Maybe everything that I had been told as a child, these stories that my mother had told me and read from the Bible, were a lie.
I think most Christians come upon that every once in a while.
Right.
Sometime in their life. I mean, I know I certainly did.
You know, I just started to, in a way, to have a crisis of faith.
Sure. A lot of people have this. A lot of people do. Obviously, you know
Right.
that.
Right.
So what did you do when that happened to you?
What I started to realize was that it's important to talk about those areas that we have questions, to get them out. Everybody has questions.
Quite a few.
And I talked to scholars who actually were looking for any evidence for the early stories of the Bible, the Israelites. And I could see in their own stories that they went from trying to rationalize the beliefs in the Bible to finally not believing it anymore because of what the information they were seeing.
Wow.
And there's somewhere between your mind and your heart where that seeps in. And what I started realizing is that your mouth is there. You need to talk about it. You need to get those questions out and talk with somebody. You need to look for answers then. I think that's one of the things I wanted to share with people is talk with other people about this, that there's doubts that you have or questions that you have in your head about these stories, about God, about faith. Fortunately, I was able to find some scholars who actually had a completely different interpretation. That was the impetus for me to move forward in the rest of this journey,
Sure.
To uncover it. Because I had to know, is this really true or isn't it?
So does the history of the Bible, does it have to be true? Does it have to have happened for people to believe?
I know a lot of people ask that question. In other words, wait a minute, couldn't we just take these as moral teachings? There are people who I've interviewed as a filmmaker that said, that's all it is. Don't try to derive anything more, that there's any history in this. And a lot of them backed into that, I believe.
I know a lot of people believe that way. They just believe it's all, they're myths, they're stories, maybe they're moral teachings, but they don't believe that it actually was a historical event.
You don't separate your mind from your heart, or whatever that part is of faith. I started to realize faith and reason can come together, and I think they're supposed to come together. They're not competing with each other. Dr. Gregory Allen Thornberry is an intellectual and the 6th president of New York City's The King's College. Dr. Thornberry attended one of our New York City showings and was greatly affected by the film because earlier in his life he had his own challenges with the dynamics between faith and reason. People such as Richard Dawkins and Christopher Hitchens basically have said that faith is a great cop-out. That people of faith are not intellectuals, they're just following their emotions. How would you respond to that?
The Christian faith is definitely intellectual in its dimensions, and to suggest otherwise is pure ignorance of history. If you go back through the ages and you look at geniuses like Pascal or Leibniz, who were fundamental figures in the development of the calculus, for example, progenitors of modern science like Francis Bacon, and the inductive method of scientific inquiry upon which people like Richard Dawkins and people of his ilk stake their claim. These people were all Christians. Modern science arose in the Christian West because there was this relentless pursuit of the truth, this willingness to say, we're going to go wherever the evidence leads. And they were driven by the fact that they felt as though God created the world in a rational fashion. So we should be able to figure out how it is put together. That's how modern science arose from a previous era of superstition.
So biblical faith includes the mind and even evidence.
Everywhere that I look, I see people of faith striving to understand their faith better, to understand the intellectual dimension of the faith. And certainly you see that in the history of the great universities of the past and present. People who are of faith who say that we not only believe, but we seek to understand what we believe. So it's not just purely a leap in the dark. Instead, it is a genuine exploration of where the evidence leads.
Every one of us has a skeptic inside us, right?
There's no doubt.
And so
I live in Hollywood, but yeah, go ahead.
So the thing about patterns is sort of my own personal home movie, searching for this story for myself, you see, and I'm just sharing it publicly with everybody else because I was asking those questions. You flew here, right?
Yes, I flew here.
And you put some faith in what?
That the plane was going to land.
That's right, right. So it's not that people don't have faith, they just have faith in things that they can depend upon, right?
Yeah.
As soon as it starts to not work, you don't have any faith in it anymore.
Sure.
And I think the question is are you going to give up or are you going to persevere, and just, try to find an answer to those questions? Well, I like to challenge people is to say, let's be thinkers, Let's not just believe everything you're told, but start to think about this, because I believe there are answers out there.
And I think people need the answers, because I get plenty of people coming back at me, that are atheist friends of mine and agnostic friends of mine, and they want to attack, but they don't attack with they don't attack with facts as well. They have a faith themselves that it just doesn't exist. Mm-hmm.